What's up, rSpace fans? Today, we've got 3 Am I the A-hole stories. Hope you like them. First up, am I the a-hole for telling my girlfriend to live with the decision she made? Me and my girlfriend Autumn, fake name, had our child 8 months ago. We were college students before the baby, and are college students now. We weren't and still aren't rich, but before the baby, we were relatively comfortable. We had to struggle a few times, but we could pay our bills on time and put food on the table. We didn't have to panic at the end of every month, basically. Also, I used protection. When we found out Autumn was pregnant, she seriously considered whether or not she wanted an abortion. She would always speak to me about it, but wouldn't really care for my opinion any time I tried to offer it. I was okay with that, because it's her body and she should choose what she wants. When she finally did ask, however, I gave her my honest opinion. I told her that I love her and will support whatever decision she makes, but we simply don't have any money to support a baby. And if she chooses to have the baby, we'll be struggling badly. Fast forward a few months later, and she's permanently decided she wants to keep the baby. I supported her, obviously. It's now been 8 months and 2 days since the birth of my daughter. The problem here is that every other day, she complains and lets it be known that she wouldn't have chose to have our baby if she knew we'd be in such a financial situation. Finally, after 8 months, I got fed up. I told her, the facts are you chose to have a baby, and you're not going to say every day how you regret having her. Be a grown-up and live with the decision you made. She responded by telling me how I chose to have a baby with her too, and how I need to support her. Basically, she started yelling, and I just took our daughter and left. It's been a few days since this happened, and she has said multiple times she doesn't think she's wrong. I really just want a third opinion. Am I the asshole? In my opinion, OP, I don't think you're the a-hole. I get that it's hard to have a child, especially in a financially unstable situation, but I think parents should never ever say that they regret having their kids. Kids never need to hear their parents say that, and if parents say it every day, it's only a matter of time before the kid picks up on it. She's 8 months old now, but she is learning to understand language. Everything she hears, while she may not understand the words yet, are being ingrained in her subconscious memories and may affect her as she grows older. She understands a ton now. Pretty soon, she'll understand words and be saying words herself. Do you and your girlfriend want her to know from a young age what a burden she is? Time to stop saying she was a mistake, and time to stop thinking of her that way. Both of you need to accept the decision you made, or decide if your child would be better off if you gave her up for adoption, so you can start over with people who would love her and be glad to have her. Whew, that was a good opening story. How about this next one? Am I the a-hole for uninviting my family from a wedding because they want to share it with my sister? To preface this, we only got engaged about 10 weeks ago and have plans for November 2021, but if there's still issues at the time, we'll postpone. My sister, we'll call her Rosie, and I have always had a complex relationship, but my bigger problem is her fiancé, we'll call him Mick, who I detest with my entire being. Mick is like a caricature of the phrase toxic masculinity. One time, my daughter, age 7, painted my son, age 5, and my fiancé's nails. And Mick called my son and fiancé sissies because they had nail polish on. He's also hit on me in the past and slut-shamed me. So yeah, hate him. Fiancé also hates him. My parents wanted to invite all about 40 people to our wedding. Our guest list is only 20 guests. So the agreement we came to was they pay for 2/3 of the wedding as they had 2/3 of the guests. So far, all we have arranged is a venue. And it's a good thing we did, too, because there's only 3 venues in the area, and November 2021 was the earliest date any of them had available. Rosie and Mick got engaged last week. Rosie has looked for venues, and the first available date is April 2022. Mom and Dad told us today that we will now be having a double wedding. Everyone involved is aware of the issues we have with Mick. We refused to share the wedding. My parents said they were paying for 2/3 of it, so they should have the final say. I responded that they don't get a say on who is getting married. They said I was being immature and should learn to share the spotlight. And I said that my issue was seeing Mick standing next to my fiancé at the altar. My parents tried to young lady me, I'm nearly 28, saying that Rosie can't get anything in the next 18 months and it wasn't fair to make her wait that long. Plus, if they're paying for well over half the wedding and won't be interfering on anything else, we should allow this. I then said that we would pay for the entire wedding ourselves and go back to our original guest list minus my parents, Mick and Rosie, and then hung up. I definitely just snapped in the moment, but the idea of sharing my wedding with Mick gives me a visceral negative reaction. Since hanging out my fiance says that he's fine with this development, though he wasn't expecting it, but he supports me. However, my parents and sister feel I overreacted and called me an arse for uninviting them over them having one thing they wanted at the wedding they're paying for. I felt pretty confident in my choice, but then my brother, who hates Mick as much as we do, said I needed to calm the F down and that the logical response here would have been to return my parents' money and remove their guests, not to uninvite my parents from my wedding entirely, and said unless I fix it, I'd be going full bridezilla. Am I the a-hole? Edit. To be clear, I am 100% returning the money. The idea of the money was that we add my parents' guests, which is no longer happening, so I will be returning their money. OP, you are not the a-hole. Even if you like them, being told to share your wedding is pretty unreasonable. I think everyone has the right to be selfish for their wedding because it is an incredibly important day that sets the mood for the entire marriage. I agree with you declining their money and their guests. Good for you for standing up to them. Also, if possible, make sure to call your venue and any vendors you book and set up a password for making any changes to the event, along with looking into security personnel to help rid any unwanted party members crashing the event. Also, even if you manage to resolve this and let them attend as guests, please set some very clear boundaries with your parents and do not accept money from them because they will pull exactly the same stunt about anything in your wedding that they want to change. Whew, wedding drama. Crazy, right? Alright, next up. Am I the a-hole for not agreeing to a paternity test unless my husband goes to therapy? I, 28 female, and my husband, 32 male, have a 3-year-old son together. There has never been any doubt that my husband is the father. I've never given him any cause for concern that I cheated on him. He acknowledges all of this. Last week, he came to me and said that for the last few months, he has been plagued, his word, with the anxiety that our son is not his. They don't look identical, granted, but they definitely share similar features, and I see my husband whenever I look at my son. I was obviously blindsided by this. I had no idea he was having these thoughts. I asked him to explain why he thought that he wasn't his, and he couldn't really provide any answer other than a gut feeling. He asked me if I would be okay if he got a paternity test done so it could ease his mind. I initially said absolutely not, no way in hell. I was very, very offended. He told me that he could just do it without my permission, and I said if he did that, I would never forgive him. My husband does not have a history of anxiety, but he did lose his job back at the start of the pandemic, so he's been with our son most of the time while I work my full-time job from home. I know this hasn't been easy for him. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but maybe he's starting to resent our son or something from just having to be around him constantly. After our heated first conversation, I spoke with some friends about it, and they said that he was probably having psychiatric problems due to the stress of not having a job. I came back to my husband and said if he went to therapy and maybe started taking some anti-anxiety meds, that I would consider getting the test. He was very upset at this and said that once he got the results of the test back, he wouldn't be anxious anymore, and that I wasn't being fair by making him go through a whole rigmarole, again, his word, just to get peace of mind, which was a phrase he used a lot during this. He again threatened to just get the test without my permission, and I said this would effectively end our relationship. I think there's something more serious going on here, and I thought that my solution here is as fair as I'm willing to be. My friends are divided. Some think I should just take the test, and others are saying he's being insane, and that if I cave to this, there's just going to be something else. I need some neutral perspective here. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I haven't read all the comments here because the amount of responses has been overwhelming. However, I want to say that I really do not appreciate strangers attempting to diagnose my husband over the internet. It is disgustingly presumptuous. I'm his wife, and I don't feel qualified to do that, which is exactly why I want to get a licensed therapist. Another thing I'm seeing pop up is that I'm somehow demanding that he take medication. I said maybe medication, meaning that I only think he should be on medication if a licensed therapist prescribes them to him. I don't want to shove pills down his throat, which seems to be what some people think I want to do. As for the numerous suggestions of marriage counseling as opposed to individual therapy, I think this is a great idea. I didn't initially consider it because I was so focused on it being his problem, but we are ultimately a team, and I'll suggest that to him today. Hopefully it goes better. Thanks everyone for your input. Before we get into the update, I just want to say that I already don't think OP is the a-hole in this story, but getting to the root of this obsession has very different implications for your marriage. If it's simply an irrational anxiety, he can get treatment for that. If he's been red-pilled, that's a whole other issue that he won't see as requiring treatment and is a much tougher battle. Also, the husband's anxiety and accusations are honestly a bit suspicious to me. Psychologically, if your partner is obsessively worrying about you cheating on them, they are likely to be cheating on you themselves as a result of guilt projection. Of course, let's hope that's not the case in this story. Let's see what happens. Here's the update. Unfortunately, this is not a great update. If you don't want to read it all, the bottom line is we're heading toward divorce. I took some of the commenters' advice to go to couples therapy, which we did that same week as my first post. I had to push him a bit to get him to agree to therapy, but I told him it was either this or I would never give in to the test. The first Zoom session was a little awkward since neither of us had ever done therapy before. After listening to both of us, she basically said that she thought we should do the test to see if that eases his anxiety, and that if it doesn't, which at the time was my concern, that we could go from there. So my husband was thrilled, and I agreed, but I wanted to be on Zoom with a therapist when we received the results so we could talk it out with her there, which he was fine with. So we do the test, and we did our Zoom session with our results were in. And surprise, surprise, the paternity test says he's 99% likely to be the father. He didn't appear to be relieved or happy or anything of what I expected. Maybe this was unfair, but I did expect him to cry and maybe apologize to me for his lack of trust. This wasn't just my imagination though, because when the therapist asked him in our first session how he would feel if the test came back saying he was the father, he said he would feel relieved. But he was angry. He kept saying that it was over and that he didn't want to talk about it. He kept repeating, "It's done," over and over when the therapist would try to ask a question about how he was feeling. And he was obviously not listening when I tried to talk about my feelings. And when I told him I wanted to talk about it, he yelled at me, which he never does. What else is there to effing talk about? I was mortified that he was talking to me this way in front of a therapist, and she said we should schedule a new session once he had time to process. After the session, he wouldn't look at me or speak to me. That he was so upset that he was our wonderful son's father made me absolutely lose my mind. We screamed at each other, and it ended with me saying that I couldn't do this anymore. He's at his brother's apartment now, finally away from our son, which is obviously what he wanted all along, and my mom is now staying at my place to help me out around the house. I texted him this weekend asking if he wanted to do another therapy session, and he asked if I really thought that would help, and I had to admit that I didn't. The speed at which this whole thing happened. Just a month ago, I would have said we have a happy marriage. It's still completely shocking to me, but I don't see us recovering from this. This felt cathartic to type out though, so thanks I guess? I'm so sorry for this outcome, OP. I think he already wanted to end the marriage for whatever reason, and the paternity thing was just a ruse. He probably figured either you'd be so outraged that it could send you two into a downward spiral in which you'd look like the bad guy for refusing to do the test, or maybe there was some chance he wasn't the father and he could then feel righteous in his reasoning for leaving you. Now, he's acting like such an a-hole that you want to leave him, so I think he wants your marriage to end, but doesn't have the guts to do it properly. Sorry, good luck.